As we hit the top of the hour to read the note well, this is a reminder that the ITF policies are in effect. You should read the note well carefully. It has topics on patents and code of conduct. It is only meant to point you in the right direction. Please see BCP 79. As a reminder, by participating in the ITF, you agree to follow the ITF processes and policies. If you are aware that you should be aware that the ITF contributions are covered by patents. If they are, you should disclose that fact. And any participant, you acknowledge that the written audio, video, and photographic records of the meetings may be public. Uh, Please let us know if you have any questions. That's my 1 minute note. Well, please do take a look at all those specifications. I'm doing the agenda bashing and the chair slides, and I will try to be effective. We'll start with agenda bashing, and then I will go into some things for authors on BGP tunnel and encapsulation attribute, people who are adding TLVs to it or sub TLVs. And then we will go through the link bandwidth and then into BGP SR policy and BGP LS drafts, float spec, CAT information, and the SC path attribute. And lastly, Guinan will cover a draft on V6, V4 islands over a V6 core. We will then have on Friday our session. We've continued the wonderful tradition of being scheduled Monday and Friday, and we will have more presentations there, both label carrying dynamic capability and more BGPLS and SR. Okay, let me go into the status report. John Scudder, thanks to our departing AD, has had 7 RFCs approved. Very much kudo and hand claps to John Scudder for getting all of these drafts through. I've given you the dates they were approved. You can see John was working mightily in his things. All of these are in the RFC editor queue, and we are very pleased. Okay, now, what happens is we did get CAR and CT as experimental drafts as this, in order to make everything work well. I'm trying to give deployment reports. I will put some of this information up on the wiki. CT did give me some of their details. CAR will give me details in the next ITF. Why am I giving this? Part of an experimental draft is I have to report on the experiment. So as the shepherd for CAR and CT, I will try to give you details. I'm taking what the authors have. If you have details for me, please do that. This is part of my requirements to follow up as the shepherd for these. So CT has 2 deployed customers, lots of potential, and more use cases. I think I will give another brief as I got an email last night on more CT. CAR, I know there are deployed customers. I know there are multiple implementations. I just didn't get the information prior to this. Again, you will see this for the next 4 to 5 ITS as we go through the cycle of an experimental RFC heading toward a proposed standard. Now, where are we with post working group drafts? We have 2 drafts in the process. We have draft ITF RDR ST1 Edge Discovery, which has gone through 2 or 3 routing dir, but we are requested to send it through another one. Kayer is the shepherd. Draft ITF IDR BGPLS SRV TM MT is an informational draft, and I'm waiting for a routing dir. Why do I flag that? Because every draft that goes to the ISG through the routing ADs must have a routing dir review. We have 2 new drafts that were coming back. I believe that were published, either will be published last night or today, and we will do working group last call on changes. It went to the ISG, came back, so you will get another working group last call. We have post working group last call for which we're holding for implementations. BGP model, the IDR chairs have are strongly considering sending this to the RFC without 2 implementations. If you have objections, please send a note to the chairs. Draft IDR entropy label 16 is still waiting for 2 implementations. We have other drafts that need revision because they're tagged for other things. Draft ITF IDR flow spec redirect IP is holding on draft ITF IDR RPR 19 and draft ITF IDR TS flow spec SR policy 6. The AD would like to see all of these drafts go with the flow spec redirect. ITF working group last call. We have a working group last call for draft ITF IDR SR policy NRP 03. That will probably go with its LS feature. We have a stack of these pending working group last calls waiting for revisions. You can read that if you're on that list. We're in 2 pending adoptions for V6, Draft Mishra, IDR V4, Iceland V6 Core. It's an informational draft, and Draft White link local capability. I do not think we have a Draft White link local capability presentation at this. We also have a Yang model, which I'm thrilled to see a Yang model coming up. Okay, I have, as part of the chairs, I have started to do pre-adoption reviews. You will note that I've reviewed a whole bunch. There's a place for a shepherd for your BGPLS. You will note that I have added folks for today's to the list if you're brand new. For ones that have repeated, I've sent out an update. You can go to these websites for your reviews. I will try to note who's done adoption requests. And I believe I should have taken a step back for people who are new. We are doing adoption requests and trying to do pre shepherd reviews. That means by the time the individual drafts get to the IDR, we've at least tried to go once or twice through their document and have a presentation at IDR. We started with SR and routing and BGPLS. I will start to put a wiki up on all the flow spec pre-allocation drafts. And Jeff, I think that's it for this slide, except to mention things that have new concept. We oftentimes have all the shepherds reviews, so sometimes they go a little later. Now, I don't know, Jeff, do you need to grab it back to get me the next slide? I think it might be wise.
I think you can just take it and move to the next one. I only have to control it for in-room.
Okay.
If you like, I can delegate it to you.
No, I'm trying to stop the slides and find the new slides. I am not share slides. Okay. Okay. By the way, any questions before I paused on the status of information? The wiki has the status up to the last point, and it has these reviews. So please, if you have a concern, do let me know so I can keep up. We're hoping that by increasing the number of ways you can get the feedback. Now, I'm a little bit slow on my first schedule, so let's see if I can catch up. Okay, one of the things Jeff, Kara, and I and G have been looking at how do we make things effective for reviews. And there are, we've started to do these pre-reviews for BGP that's being used for SR routing and BGPLS. Now, part of the SR routing I noticed is I'm repeating things when I send reviews. So I have a template that I've been using. It's on the wiki. If you don't, you're going to start to see please templates. Why do we need a template? Well, RFC 9012, bless the little authors, uh, lacks a real template for adding new tunnels or new sub-TLVs. I suspect because they thought they were done, but and things were workable. But the sad result is that oftentimes when I get to do the review for the tunnel and caption attributes, it's a painful process because I keep saying, well, you need to have this and you need to have this. Well, that's painful for you and me. So I created a template. What I'm really looking for is the information. Uh, the non-goal is a specific template. The goal is so that when you come up to Shepherd review before working group last call or after working group last call, you're not surprised. You have a good life. So it's on the wiki. You can look at it, but let me quickly go through what should be in there. For a new tunnel, and that's if you're specifying something like SR policy or a new tunnel, it should have a name. We'll have a short name that goes into the IANA location and it'll pop up in the registry. The code will be the same, but IANA will assign it. You'll have a description. Now, you can point to another description. You can point to another portion in your draft, but please give a short description so we know what goes there. Then, this is really important. If you're defining a new TLV, tell me what are your mandatory sub TLVs, what's your optional sub TLVs, and please be complete. Look at IANA or IDR or BIS IDs. Also tell which sub TLVs are not supported. That's important. RFC 9012 only specifies a certain thing. Then talk about the validation procedures. How does the user know that this creates a valid tunnel? Okay, you can reference material in other RFCs, but you should be complete. Like, take this RFC and that RFC, and there's my validation. If you have multiple tunnel TOVs, let's say your new tunnel can be used several times to create it. Well, tell us if there are interaction between the tunnel TLVs. Maybe one tunnel can use another. Give security considerations. This is tripped over. Critical information means information about the infrastructure that any operator might consider problematic if everyone knew. Uh, Link information types. Instruct people. The security ADs look at this. Management, tell how to manage it. That's what gets tripped up when the ops area director looks at it. Now, there's a lot of do's and don'ts. Uh, The idea is do the procedure and don't use things that are not common. Like if you're going to give a code that's not assigned, use TBD XX and do give the AFI SAFI that the tunnel works for. If it's an NRI and it works for all NRIs, we'll enumerate it because believe it or not, that's another trip up. Okay. If you don't know the validation procedures in 9012, take a look at it. If you're basing yourself off a SR policy SAFI, look at that. You don't have to repeat it. Just tell us where you're different. Okay. If you have multiple tunnels, decide if the multiple TLV tunnels are applicable for all AFI-SAFIs or just some. Don't forget to mention all the tunnel types. Write the security considerations. Write if Yang can be used to manage it. I saw a presentation today on the TVR, the time-based thing, that actually linked to a Yang model. 3 cheers. Okay, template 2. This is where most of you will be. Many of you, and I believe we have 10 or I think we're closer to 15 uh, IDR drafts and about the same individual drafts that are specifying new sub TLVs. Follow this template. Same thing. Give a short name. Determine who's got the code. If it's assigned, put that Diana has assigned it. Encode the sub-TLV, give the diagram of the sub-TLV, the description, what the links are, the handling. Again, talk about how it interacts with other TLVs. I know this is probably very, um, uh, sounds very boring, but believe me, it's less boring if you're an author and you don't do it because you'll be at the end of your cycle and life will be bad. Now, one thing that's hidden is the validation procedure. If your sub TLV plays a part in validating a ton TLV, talk about it. If you have a bad sub TLV, can it be ignored like RFC 9012 says? Okay, do's and don'ts, same sort of thing. Be short. Be unique in your name. Believe me, Diana comes back to me and says, oh, there are 5 things with the same name. Doesn't work for us. We then have to go back to defining things. Uh, Again, same thing. Please be complete. Read the do's and don'ts carefully if you're an author. I tried to be complete in the slides as well as the um, presentation. Okay, I'm going to give one last plea for security consideration. You can, on security consideration, reference security from RFC 9012, from subsequent drafts like draft ITF, IDR, SR, SAFI, SR policy, SAFI, but don't skip it because you say that that's all there is. If you're adding a sub TLV, you're always adding a critical piece of information. So record what's critical, record how you're going to protect it, and go on. Same is true for management from Yang. Okay, I'm hopeful that if I actually talk about this, someone will remember to read it because my Shepherd reports will continue on SR routing and BGPLS to use some sort of template. Lastly, if you're in BEST, and this is more for my BEST presentation, you may have a PMSI interaction for your tunnel TLV. I'm not going to cover it here, but if you suddenly are working with a PMSI interaction, do take a look at this slide and listen to the BEST presentation. Jeff, if I'm lucky, Um, okay, so best practice, how to find out how to write this. Look at other drafts. I work through draft ITF, IDR, SR policy, SAFI with Caton. So I'm glad he's going to be the AD. He's seen me work through all of that. I wrote my own section of it adhering to the SD-WAN. I upgraded it. That's why you have a /22 with this same material. And I chatted with Jeffrey Zhang on the best controller. Okay, I will start. I've put up the reviews on BGP, SR routing in BGP, and if this template proves helpful, I'll try to use it for BGPLS and FlowSpec. Any questions? If you need help, I really would prefer to help you write this section than to go through these late reviews. And that's the pain that caused me to write this. Okay, Jeff, I think I'm back to on schedule.
Yeah, we actually have some slack in our schedule, and we're taking advantage, and this is important for the working group. We are taking advantage of some of the slack in our schedule to pad some of the times that were requested so that people can actually have good in-room microphone discussion. So please, if you have opinions you want to share, this is an excellent IDR to do that at. Sue, there are no questions at the microphone.
Okay, well, hopefully this is part of Jeff's and Kare's and G's and my idea on how to make your life a little better. Using these templates, doing early reviews, we hope this will get your drafts through in a more effective fashion. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
And I think we go back. I'm going to close the deck, and then do you get to take back control somehow?
Yep, I'll be driving the sharing here. Forthcoming presentation is our link bandwidth update from Reshma.
Hello everyone, I'm Reshma Das and I'll be presenting the BGP link bandwidth extended community.
Okay, Reshma, you should actually have slide control now.
Okay, thanks Jeff. Okay, so going through our agenda, we'll see what is the goal we have set to achieve, what is the current solution that we have updated in the draft. We'll spend some time on error handling because as you can see in the idea thread, there is some discussion going on. So this is where what we wanted to discuss in this idea. We'll see the current, what is the status of the solution, and also what is the next steps. So when we started this exercise, it was to revive and retain the existing draft. So we wanted to achieve interop with the existing link bandwidth community solutions that has been deployed with minimum changes. So the idea was to keep the procedure simple. One of the assumptions that we took are that the receiver should be upgraded for interop. So any receiver has to be upgraded to the latest IDR draft for interop to work successfully. We wanted to keep the RR procedure simple. So the RR is transparent. It doesn't do any modification of the link bandwidth community, and it just reflects. We also wanted to cover all applicable cases, intra-AS, inter-AS, all the deployed cases, and clearly have a error handling definition also in the new draft. So that's what the goal was. So next we'll look at what the current solution is. So this has been currently updated in the latest draft. Sorry, I think. Yeah. So the solution goes like a sender or an originator of the link bandwidth extended community should be able to originate either a transitive or non-transitive link bandwidth community, and an implementation should provide some configuration that allows it to set the transitivity type of the link bandwidth extended community. We also say that no more than one link bandwidth extended community shall be attached to a route at origination. A receiver must be able to process the link bandwidth community of either transitivity. So the receiver should not flap or treat the route as malformed based on the transitivity type of the link bandwidth community. Re-advertisement with next stop self. So this is when BGP speaker re-advertises a route with a link bandwidth extended community and sets itself as the next stop. So this should be following the same procedure as outlined in the sender. But as like current BGP standard procedures, if there are no import or export policies that alter the link bandwidth extended community, this will be equivalent to whatever is received on with the route. Re-advertisement with next up unchanged. So this is as I said before, when a BGP speaker receives a link bandwidth community and it re-advertises or reflect. So this is like an RR case. It should re-advertise without changing the link bandwidth extended community. So it should not change the link bandwidth extended community. So this is the proposed solution, and it has been already updated in the draft. And we have presented this in multiple IDR session. So now this is something we wanted to spend time and discuss because the current draft text has some it lacks some clarity, and that raises some discussion. It has raised some discussion in the idea thread, and we wanted to spend time on this and also come up with we have come up with what we want to update, so it gives you the clarity. So this is what we can discuss today also. So in the current draft, we basically speaks about how should a conflict or a error when there are more than one link bandwidth extended community present on a route be handled. So we said that we have to prefer the lowest value of the attached link bandwidth community, irrespective of their transitivity. And we also stated to prefer the transitive link bandwidth extended community over non-transitive if they have the same value. And implementations may provide configurations to override this. So what this text actually lacks clarity is where is this error handling used? And it also raises good points from the idea that what happens in RR where it will actually affect the behavior. So that's why we suggest what we try to say during this in this is that this error handling is not at the BGP send or receive layer, but rather wherever the ECMP is computed. So weighted ECMP is computed. So if you have two values at weighted ECMP, which value would you pick? So, and that is where this error handling comes. And when we speak about it like that, the transitivity, if the values are equal, the transitivity doesn't really matter. So that's what we have updated the suggested text that we would like to update in the draft. So if I could just go over that, it is that if a BGP speaker receives a route with more than one link bandwidth extended community, then when you use it to compute the weighted ECMP, we should always prefer the lowest value, irrespective of the transitivity. But if the values are same, then the transitivity does not matter for the purpose of computing weighted ECMP. So that means the procedure does not affect the RR. And when you re-advertise, the link bandwidth extended community received on the route will remain as is and will without any modification. So that is the suggested text that we would like to update. And yes, we can discuss this more.
So Reshma, there is the point in the chat from Tony P that's actually worth repeating to the mic. I'm going to just read it out for Tony, unless he cares to jump on in line. He says, for the presentation, he sees an interesting hole that if a node is configured to advertise transitive and receives a non-transitive, and I'm going to assume that this is within the same AS, does it still propagate it? I believe the answer to that's yes. What do you think the current text actually covers for that?
Okay, if a node is configured to advertise transitive, yes, it would, right? So unless you have some policy that will override it or change it, right?
Yeah, and I think the point that Tony's sort of indirectly bringing up is We have cases where we are originating or altering a link bandwidth community, and we have policies about what we do with that. And origination versus propagation are slightly different things. So perhaps our next audit pass through the document should look at it specifically for those two specific bits of terms.
Okay. So yeah. So that's right. With origination, that's why we have also divided the document in the draft, like as an originator, as well as propagation with next stop self and without next changing the next stop. So yeah, we can go through it and see. Okay. So current status, like customers have requested the work for like since vendors have transitive and non-transitive versions to attain interoperability and to accommodate all their existing deployments. Customers have requested the draft to be updated as well as to work on it. Juniper has implementation that supports both sending and receiving of both transitive and non-transitive link bandwidth extended community. We have had incremental support from other vendors also, where we have seen them support both the versions. We also thank all the participating vendors in this discussion, which has helped. And yeah. So what we want to like next step is like we want to close all the discussions that are currently happening in GitHub and that mailing list. Then request for standardizing the solution. Also follow up on the work of we would like the chairs to start the follow up work on 4360 BIS, which is like if at the ACE boundary non-transitive community extended communities originated, should it be advertised over the draft over the link to a different ACE, so which we had brought up in the last meeting. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, thanks for the presentation. We do have people in the queue for questions.
Okay.
The points that I do want to raise before we pass it to the queue is that this is a very important feature. Please pay attention to these procedures because, and I do want to publicly thank Reshma for taking up this work on doing all the cat herding on getting all of these things working together, because we have different implementations and somewhat different motivations, and this has been a strong consensus building exercise for her. And conveniently, we're seeing the cues telling us that there is interest. So Alexander, you have the first cue.
Hi, Alexander Azimov, Yango. As far as I understand, there is a restriction that for each route there should be one transitive bandwidth community. Can you describe the reasoning behind this restriction?
I'm sorry, like are you saying restriction at the send side or?
So as far as I understand, there should be only one transitive bandwidth community for a route.
No, we are saying it is a knob driven, like at a sender or an originator. It can be a transitive or non-transitive, and implementation should provide a configuration to support whichever transitivity.
Why there is a restriction that it's only one transitive bandwidth community? So what is the reason behind this restriction?
You are asking why is the restriction of only one extended community?
Why is it a singleton?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are saying that so it should be a singleton, right? Like why would you want it to be both transitive and non-transitive? Like it should be like one true value, right? Like, and if you keep it transitive, it will be for all cases. It will cover both inter and intra A's, right?
So I think Alexander's question's sort of in two parts. Part number one, this thing should be a singleton. We expect that link bandwidth generally is not going to have more than one instance because it doesn't have clear context if that's the case. The text that the authors put together to choose the lowest one was really the deal with edge cases, because these things are communities, extended communities in this case. And this means that not only might routers automatically add these things, but interaction with policy might accidentally, do add more than one as an example, and that can complicate things. Your second possible point is that much of what this draft is addressing is that we've had specification for non-transitive for quite some time. We've had vendors like Juniper that have had transitive implemented for quite some time, and we've had use cases, especially coming from BESS in the last couple of years, where there's a desire to control transitivity. So this means that we also have motivation to have both transitive and non-transitive cases, which then opens up the ambiguity about singleton. If you have transitivity requirements, how do you make sure that you choose one? And that's what the procedures are largely for.
Okay. I still have a question, but I will bring it to the mailing list.
Gary, follow?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Shasha, said another way, you want to only signal one value in that community. And then as an operator, you can say whether it's transitive across the ASUs or not. But you don't want to have multiple values going through for each transitivity cases.
Okay, I will just clarify the scenario that I'm thinking about. It's access when you really don't know the benefits of the other your indirect peer. And my thinking was that it might be a solution.
We'll take it on the mailing list.
Yeah, and again, this is good discussion. That's the point here. So Maria, you're next up in the queue.
Maria, Bert, Sinek. Hello. My question is basically, how much is this going to, in which way is this going to behave in nodes which are not aware of this RFC? Because I am completely missing a section in that draft stating what's going to happen or what's expected to happen when such community leaves somebody's network and runs over the whole world and then gets interpreted by some implementation on the other side, possibly buggy or something like that. We remember those problems with the misconfigured attribute, I think 29 or something like that. So my question is, what's actually expected and whether it's going to be in the draft. Thanks.
So if I understand your question, you're asking like if this community, let's say the transitive community, extended link bandwidth extended community is received by someone who doesn't understand the link bandwidth transitive community, what is going to happen, and then later how it is passed down, if it is passed down to someone else, and there it is actually read. Is that my right interpretation of the question?
Yes, the basic scenario is somebody fails to filter this out on the egress, where the other side just does not like this community at all, and what's actually expected to happen with this community in the implementations. Well, I'm not asking for what should happen, but more like whether there is an analysis, whether it's going to make some problems on the other side of the world when leaked. Thanks.
Okay. So if my understanding is that this would apply for any extended community, right? Like there could be someone who can treat this as a unknown extended community, but can pass it on further, right? So that becomes generic to extended community. Is that the correct
Yeah.
interpretation?
So this is Kev. I think that's a good point, since you don't have capabilities in there, but a draft could make a draft could add Reshma some text which says here are the implications. Please know in case you have implementations with and without this community supported. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but we do say that for interop specifically, right? Like if we need the receiver to be upgraded.
Yeah. So
That is specifically mentioned in the draft. But yeah.
So you could add a passing comment there itself and say both for interop as well as for old and new implementation specifically.
And sort of building what Kayer is talking about, there is BCP, both in terms of I think it's BCP 172 and also some common BCPs from like Nanog about community scrubbing in general. So these magic communities like link bandwidth have implementation magic behavior that the operator in many cases does not have to configure. And I think that's part of the concern that's being raised. Community scrubbing is important and it's documented elsewhere, and certainly emphasizing those points inside of the current draft is a reasonable thing.
Okay.
Jeff, you have the cue.
Justin Sur, NVIDIA. So it's not the first time this question is asked, but I think we need to figure out. So the relationship with cumulative draft and best, right? Actually, the use of implementation of this technology, right? I believe it's mostly deployed in data centers, deployed at huge scale. I deployed in one of them, and I think it's not entirely clear who's doing what. If this draft is defining just the bandwidth community and kind of error behavior, and we stop there. What if tomorrow I want to use large community? What if the after tomorrow I want to use something else? I mean, who's doing what and how do we progress? So the cumulative draft has been deployed in every OS I'm familiar with, right? It's been deployed at scale. It follows particular logic. So cumulative behavior really describes how you multiply issues. Sorry, it's a regulation in California. How you propagate original value so it represents the ratios between between different values of the community, right? So how do these two drafts or potentially more drafts coexist, and who's doing what and where?
Okay, so the best draft, which is Satya's part, and he's also part of this draft. So the best draft is like informational, and it uses that whatever a knob that allows it to advertise the non-transitive over ACE boundary.
Not just that, right? It uses different logic, very different.
So at the end, it uses the community that this draft talks about, right? So this is where
there are the competing ones. We have the best no draft that does use this community, and there's also the EVPN related one that's a brand new community.
Correct. So this is where the definition of the community remains.
So are we as community in agreement that this draft defines the community, and if tomorrow we want to use, I don't know, again, large community, we are going to have new draft, and then we'll have use cases that can progress on BESS or an IDR or someplace else. Is that the agreement with chairs and ADs?
Yeah.
So if I can give some input there. So I think in my opinion, link bandwidth community as it stands defined in this draft, right? That itself is like already deployed in the transitive and non-transitive form. And we are just recording what is already there and then making them interop. Because the draft does not state both the transitive and non-transitive procedures clearly. So it is not possible to have the current deployments interoperate. So that is the goal of this draft, to make those deployments interoperate.
Yeah, and this is Kev with Working Group Chair hat on. To answer your question, Jeff, this working group will define the community as you see, and once you have that in place, obviously, if there are competing proposals, then the chairs will work with the other working group chairs to sort of resolve that. But you want a single source of truth for protocol to function properly, and that would be pretty much done here.
Okay, so this defines relationship, right? We define the community here. Use cases, drafts, and potential deviations and different behaviors could be defined either in IDR or BESS or someplace else. They will refer to this to become RFC, and this is how we progress, right?
This has been shipping for quite some time. We're not really doing a lot that's new here. The purpose of this draft is sort of twofold. The first part is just simply reconciling the fact that we've had transitive and non-transitive versions of this, and we need to make sure that they work in harmony. The second piece that you're sort of raising is, what is this link bandwidth used for? And like the cumulative case is one of the examples of that. And again, that's been deployed for quite some time. And in terms of how it's actually used and how it's carried inside of this link bandwidth, is again sort of existing and standing procedure. So we're not changing the world here. I think to some extent, your second point is there are applications for link bandwidth type things that might motivate more than one kind of link bandwidth, and that has come up in conversation before, especially with the best chairs. But that's not what this draft is attempting to accomplish.
Okay, so we finish it to define just this community, and if in the future another type of community comes up, we'll write new draft and define new community.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And a thing that's worth highlighting as well is one of the drafts that has popped up in BES, and a prior version had been presented in IDR, is a new type of link bandwidth that gets away from the floating point format that we currently define. So that's something for you to take a look at in terms of precision of representation along with application.
Yeah, just one clarification. Thank you, Jeff and Kira.
Yes, thank you.
Can I? Ketan Talaulikar. Jeff, it would be good, or it would be actually great if you could pass this feedback on the mailing list in IDR and also copy BES, and we can take these conversations forward.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Stefan, mic is yours.
Yeah, Stefan from Cisco. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. First of all, I like the new text proposal about clarifying what's happening for the ECMP, WECMP computation versus the re-advertisement. I will look at it offline to ensure that I have no more comment, but it looks really better. Thank you. I agree with Jeff that we need to do another pass on the text to ensure that we are really strong in clarifying what is the behavior related to origination of community versus when we are propagating them, because usually this is where we had some discussion because there was some ambiguity. I'm still wondering, coming back to Alex's comment, if we could have some use case where we should actually authorize originating two communities, but when I say two communities, it's two communities with different transitivity value, because I'm personally not really a fan of mandating to have all the nodes fully upgraded to be able to have interrupts. Usually not really good in terms of incremental deployment and so on. And also, we never know. Maybe we could have some devices at some customers that may never be able to be upgraded. And if, for instance, they just support one type of community, we need to have a way to convey this community to them. So we could discuss that offline, but maybe authorizing the possibility to originate one link bandwidth per transitivity type could be useful in some cases. And the last point that Maria's pointed as well, we are really worried about, I would say, leaking this link bandwidth community where it should not go. So this is why I think initially this was thought as non-transitive, and possibly with additional knobs we could explicitly allow to propagate it outside. But yeah, having this to be propagated without any control is not a good thing. So yeah, we should really take care of this in the text, whatever it's in deployment consideration or whatever. But yeah, it's something which is really important to ensure that we are not breaking the internet.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. I agree with your points. And the transitive, non-transitive, whether the pairing makes sense operationally or not is certainly part of the discussion. The draft has the current consensus. So please review it in that context. And if you disagree, now's the time to provide your input. No, we're trying to finalize this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and I've locked the queue. The discussion has been excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to point out that not only is the email list a good place to provide further feedback, but if you check the data tracker, there is a link back to GitHub where the authors do actually look at issues, and you can propose no text as well. So, Reshma, thanks for running the presentation. I think we're ready to move on to the next set.
Thank you.
Second, I need to delegate.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Li Zhang from Huawei. I will introduce the BPSR policy extensions for path scheduling on behalf of my colleagues. Okay. Let's start from the background. As per RC 9657, it introduces a set of time-variant network cases where the topology changes predictably. And based on that, TR requirements draft describes the requirements of time-variant information in the use cases. It also describes the centralized time-variant routing scenarios. In that case, the network entities receives the time variable information and also the traffic forwarding rules from a logically centralized source. This can be a architecture or a network controller. So, but there is a gap when we're using BPSR policy to carry the traffic forwarding rules. It cannot advertise the time variant information associated with the paths. So, but this time variant information is especially important in some scenarios. Okay, there are two scenarios that we identified that the time variant information is very important. The first one is a network with discontinuous links. In some cases, the links between the network entities and the network controller may be very, very weak or very intermittent. This is very typical in some resources preservation and dynamic reachability networks. In this case, the real-time SR policy advertisement may be untimely and even causing packet loss. Another case is a network with frequent topology changes. There are also some cases that the topology changes very frequent. This is very typical when the number of the network nodes is very large. For example, a dynamic reachability network with hundreds or even thousands of nodes. In this kind of network, the traffic forwarding paths also changes very frequently. So it poses a great challenge to the network controller because the controller needed to re-advertise the paths very frequent. Okay, so in order to solve this problem, we extend the BPSR policy. We extend with the schedule information. The schedule information can be applied to a candidate path or segment list to indicate the valid time for the candidate path or segment list. This theory is consists of several schedules. Each schedule is identified by a schedule ID and also a field of flags to control the format of this schedule. And also it have several time-related fields. This is consistent with the TVR schedule model, and we also do some simplification. And for the operations procedures, there are two steps. The first step is the advertisement of SR policies with schedule information. The SR policy with associated schedule information are computed by the controller or PCE, and they are originated by a BGP speaker on its behalf. And also the PCD or controller need to maintain a time pattern database to store all the predict topology change information for the computing. And when encapsulating SR policy, the controller and our PCE needed to ensure the uniqueness of the schedule ID within SR policy. When a node receives a SR policy with schedule information, first it needed to do the validations. It needed to check whether it has the capability to deal with the schedule information and check the uniqueness of schedule IDs and also the regionality of time parameters. And then it can enable or disable the candidate path or segment list based on the schedule information. Okay, for the next step, we think now the TVR use case RFC has been published and the requirements draft is near to the last call. So I think TVR solutions is very simple. So maybe working group could consider to adopt this draft. And as usual, we welcome for comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, so we have two at the microphone. Zafar, you're first.
Zafar Ali from Cisco. So I have two questions. One is that has these requirement been discussed with the time variant routing group? The second thing that comes to my mind is that why it could not be done from management plane itself. This you're coming from a controller, you have an API, then all of these things can be abstracted and device provide all these means for controlling these. So.
So sorry, I didn't get your question point. Can you repeat?
Yeah, so there are two questions.
Yeah,
one question is that has this been a requirement from time variant routing working group? The second question is that it's a bigger question is that for these things that you're trying to do, you have a controller that giving this to device, and you have an this API. Why can't this controller use management plane and take this action based on whatever time actions are needed? We can take it offline. It's okay.
Okay, well, let's discuss offline.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, Zafar, a point that Lee has in his presentation is that when the advertisements may become frequent, this avoids churn in the control plane to actually handle that. So that's part of the core use case. Okay, Sue, you're next.
Hi. Thank you very much for your revision. You will note that I caught your draft. Two things. Please send a formal request to the IDR mail list so we can track it for your adoption. I'll put it in the adoption queue today. Second, I've already done a Shepherd's review of your -08. There are things you need to fix before we go to an adoption. You might want to look at the, I've put it up on the wiki and I sent it to the IDR list. Once you find that, once you have a -09, we can talk about adoption. Unless the template discussion that I had earlier, I applied to your draft. So you'll find that we're starting to get the I'm trying to get you to do the right form starting at the beginning so implementations can go forward. If you want me to repeat all the things from the list at the mic, I didn't think it would be as effective. I just sent out the Shepherd's review, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
G?
Yeah, Chedong from Huawei. Yeah, actually, I'd like to quickly reply to Zafar's comments. The first thing is I think this requirement for this kind of a mechanism has been specified in the TVR requirement document. I think Lee also mentioned that in the presentation. The second thing is why not a management plane? I think also Jeff has mentioned this can be very frequent. And for this management plane, maybe that kind of frequency and the amount of data exchange has some challenge. So the control protocol-based mechanism is another maybe better option. And to Sue's suggestion, for sure we will comply to the template of the encaps attribute suggestion, so to revise the draft in the following revisions. Thank you.
Thank you, G. Andrew?
Andrew Stone, Nokia. Just kind of a comment on those two things stemming from Zafar and what you had mentioned about there's could be lots of churn. I feel like the value of using BGP is because you want to be reactive and because you want that real-time behavior. If you go into a mode where there's too much churn, maybe BGP is not the right protocol to use that. You want to go to netconf to do that instead, right? If you're going to preemptively compute paths or preemptively deal with change, would BGP be the right way to do that compared to the management plane? That's just a kind of an observation.
Yes, actually, GP is very typical in the centralized routing. So I think, especially in some engineering scenarios, BGP as policy is also a important way to carry the time variant information to realize the time variant traffic engineering. So this is maybe it's harder to be replaced by netconf.
So Zafar, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, Zafar Ali, Cisco again. I think there's some more discussion needed because even if you say there's a high churn, these things could be given through management plane as the schedule. So it's not the main thing. The main thing I think needs to be discussed here is that this kind of extension, there's PCE part, there's IDR part, there's a Spring part associated with it. Is this the architectural thing from time variant routing, Spring, a conversation that PC and IDR can or would like to work on? So I like to see this work like that because there will be a PC angle and same change will go to PC for the PCEP initiated policies as well. So that's really going back to what Sue was mentioning. I think there's relevant work that needs to happen in TVR and Spring, time variant routing in Spring.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Any further things? Andrew again. Actually, no, Drew. Drew, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Dhruv. Actually, there is a document, there's an RFC in PC working group which does scheduling for LSPs. And our thinking is that for SR, it's going to be exactly the same. We don't have to do anything else. In fact, it would be better if you can borrow some of the elements from there rather than redefining things again. So whatever the terms and TLV structures that there can be borrowed instead. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, we actually we have a detailed look at that RC, which is 89.13.4. Yes, yes, it's really good, and I think it is a little different with that TVR model. So we have for this draft is more consistent with the TVR model. Yeah, maybe PCE extension draft will also come soon. Yes. No.
Andrew, just a follow-up kind of observation too. You mentioned that the links may be very weak or intermittent. Does this assume that your connection to the head end is going to be stable, or is the connection to the head end also going to be weak or intermittent? Because I guess I'm just kind of wondering if, for example, I've got a node in my network and my links plural, you hope that there's enough redundancy. If those links are intermittent and unstable, those BGP sessions are going to flap themselves. And of course, those routes will be withdrawn. So I guess I'm just wondering, just to clarify, is it just the path somewhere along the network could be intermittent, or is that head end device actually some wireless node off in the distance and weather comes periodically or whatever use case? Could you actually be losing connection to that head end node, which is just withdrawing all the scheduling anyways?
Okay, Taylor. I think draft should specify that, but I've seldom seen hidden being single-threaded behind a box. It's always multi-threaded. So to your point, it's something in middle that's causing a causing a flap. But the draft should be
because I'm
fairly specific and clear about that.
Because I'm thinking about very remote nodes where you do have intermittent connectivity. You might only have one uplink, for example, and it kind of defeats the purpose of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee, for your presentation. Final comment from me. Here is one more. The authors have made available a GitHub to take feedback on their document. So if you want to submit that as well, this is a good way to provide them proposals.
And my last comment, I think if the head end only has one link, then this kind of a solution is an overkill. You don't want to do it. It's just when the redundancy is there.
Thank you. My name is Zafar Ali from Cisco. I'm presenting this draft on behalf of my co-authors. So we presented this draft at last IETF as well. There are some changes that we're going to focus, going to detail that, but first the problem statement to reiterate. So SR policies, you always have a path computed to go take the traffic to the endpoint node. So the endpoint node. Now, sometime you also have traffic that is getting steered on the policy that is towards the endpoint node. So for instance, you have an SR policy with the last SID being the node SID of the SR policy, and then you have an overlay, let's say L3 VPN traffic that has locator of the service also taking traffic to the endpoint node. So if you have a scenario like this, you may end up with a SID list where the egress has to process its node SID from a policy transport side and a service SID from the overlay side. So in that case, it's inefficient for the egress node. And it's also inefficient from a compression and from MTU point of view to carry the redundant SID. So this draft talks about cases where you can have a policy where it's programmed to suppress the endpoint node SID. So, but the endpoint node SID suppression is not possible in all cases, so it's not all the time. Let's say, for instance, your last SID for the SR policy is the agency SID from the per ultimate node to the endpoint. In that case, there is no node SID, and in those cases, the suppression is not required. You cannot remove that last agency SID because you want that agency SID to be there as part of the traffic engineering path. And same thing, if you're carrying MPLS traffic in the working scenario, then the MPLS label needs to carry the traffic to the endpoint node where the service would be then processed. So summary is that to solve this problem is really steering. It depends on what is getting steered on the traffic. That that dictates and how CBLIS is computed. So there is two part to it. There is a companion draft in PCE working group that talks about the programming of those policies from a PCE that knows what kind of traffic is steered over, and telling the head end node whether to exclude the last seed or include the last seed. And then there's a companion document here in IDR that is about the BGP API to do the same. This draft talks about BGPLS associated path, that if you have programmed a policy at the head end, either with inclusion or exclusion, this draft actually carries that information in BGPLS to let the network know that how that particular policy is programmed for all the purposes that that SR policy advertisement in BGPLS is designed for. So the proposed protocol change is very simple. There is in the BGPLS for the SR policy draft, we have this SR candidate path state TLV that has different flags for different purposes, like administrative flag, or whether that candidate path is active or a backup. There are multiple attributes defined there. So this draft defined one flag in that TLV to tell when the policy was programmed, and this is obviously policy was programmed by the head end, whether head end has excluded the last seed or not. So that's really is the change. So this was, I think last time when this draft had both the BGP policy or BGP API changes and also the BGPLS, you guys did put it in the adoption queue. It's just that draft with a limited scope that is the change from the last time. Thank you.
Bruno.
Bruno de Crane, Spring Co-Chair. I think it would be good to have a consistency of protocol extension across protocol, namely BGP, PCE, YANG. So I don't know how you plan to achieve consistency. Currently, we could have 3 documents. One option would be to have a single one. Another option would be to have a single one to define the semantic, and then have a normative reference to the semantic. Can you come back to slide 4, please? Also, thank you. Also, the BGP draft is very, very short. Mostly, if you define the problem statement or semantic in one draft, all you need is one sentence, the first one. Okay, so up to you. And finally, is there a reason to have a different name, a different name for the flag, depending on the draft? It's N for BGP, it's I for PCE. I have a very limited number of brain cells. If you could help me, thank you.
Actually,
okay. So I think there are 3 questions. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very good point. If we could have a common naming, it's only a 1-bit extension here. But if the naming is far more important than anything else, because it would avoid confusions. If you ask me.
Yeah. So so let me take one by one. I comment the naming. I think there was the reason was this, that there are other flags and there are only so many alphabets available. So you have clash, and when you have clash, you have to find something. So we still need to see if we can find a common alphabet, even if it doesn't match. So that could be done. I mean, that we can have consistent, but maybe not picking an alphabet from the name inclusion. But we can work on that. I think that's doable. The other part of it, from the point of view of from Yang and PSAP and this consistency across the thing, we're open to suggestion that you would have, if you like us to. But this problem statement is a little bit like, I mean, if you write a Spring graph, it's going to be very slim. So I don't know if that's where you are pointing or hinting, then please advise. And that could be one way, or we can present these changes, the PSEP and the IDR changes to Spring. Please advise us how you like us to do.
So far, it's a question is how do you plan to ensure consistency? So it's a question for everyone. It could be up to ISG to check all the draft.
So if I could interject here, we do not have any restrictions at IDR against having this BGBLS component specified in a draft that is in another working group. One of the discussion points with the chairs for IDR had at one point with like LSR is we have this interesting split that some of these features for BGBLS are IGP related. Some of these are related to applications like Spring. And for at least the LSR group, they had no interest in having a combined draft, despite the fact it's exactly the same feature in OSPF and ISIS. This is just another IGP from that perspective, but they didn't want to own that consistency. That said, just because LSR doesn't want to do this, if Spring would like to actually have a way of coordinating these things by centralizing the application and the extension one document, that's a good discussion point. We certainly have to poll, through the shares for IDR, but I suspect that the answer there is that as long as we last call simultaneously in IDR and we make sure IDR is, kept aware of the changes, this should work well.
Thank you. Thank you. Clarification question, maybe I should know. Regarding the naming, is there a reason to have a single letter for the flags, or we could use NP or whatever, foo or?
It's like when you do the bitwise, like when you write the TLV and you put one particular thing, is easier because then everybody think that this is the space for that bit. If you have multiple letters, then but yeah, I mean, I think this could be done. I'm open to it. There's nothing, but I'm just telling you why this is single alphabet.
Anyway, a same name could be helpful.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Bruno.
Thank you, Bruno. Sue?
I think let's work with Bruno on this. Yeah, go ahead. Any other comments?
Okay. Yeah. It's if Bruno's done, it's my turn. So BGP LSSR policy went to RFC. So I have a couple requests for you on the list. I asked you to use BGPLS in the names with the BGP-LLS. That's just a minor point. Helps me track all of these. If my understanding from BGPLS as our policy is this went to an IANA list, so please be careful with that. Make sure all your pieces. And if you're looking for adoption, I will send you out a shepherd's report. But please let me know when you've finished with Bruno so I can make the shepherd's report when you're ready to complete, if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. It's very clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Zafar. Next presentation, SR policy extensions for admin. Zhang let me pass you the slides. 1 second, please.
Can you hear me?
You are slightly quiet. Could you speak louder?
Oh, okay. This is Changwan Lin from New H3C. Here are two drafts. One is about the controlled flag for BP distributed CP or segment list flag. Another draft is about the BPLS reporting list flag. In the following scenarios, it's necessary to specify the control flag of the CP or segment list. First, we see the first scenario when the controller issued an SR policy with two segment list. We may just want to shut down pass or a segment for management or maintenance. Another example is when the forwarding delay of this segment it no longer meets the requirements. So it needs to be set to the shutdown status to prevent the segment list from forwarding. In another scenarios, the CP cannot use to be a backup path. The CP does not wish to exist as a hot standby. It only becomes the primary for forwarding when both primary failed. The another scenario is about ignore service route prefix seed. In the 6P scenarios, the SR policy already includes the EP label. So when the encapsulation at the head end, even though the segment list of SR policy can only reach the egress node, the service seed for the egress node is still added. The three scenarios is about the drop upon invalid behavior. In RFC 19.2.15.6, we defined the drop upon invalid behavior. But in the SR policy IDR, in this draft, the flag is defined in the binding seed. So the drop upon invalid behavior is not suitable for controlling the CP path behavior. So we need to define another flag to indicate the CP flag of an SR policy. So here is the extension for the BP extension. We defined two level flags. One is CP level, another is segment list level. For the CP flags, we defined 4 flags. S flag to indicate the CP is in admin shutdown state and it is ineligible for forwarding. B flag when set indicate the CP is configured as backup ineligible. I flag indicate ignore the service route prefix seed. The D flag is indicate the CP as drop upon invalid behavior. And maybe another flag is defined in another draft. The BP extension for segment list level, we defined S flag to indicate the segment list in admin shutdown state, and it is not for forwarding. Here is another draft about the BPLS extension. We define the 2-bit in the current SR policy state TLVs. 1 bit is indicate the CP config as backup ineligible. Another flag is indicate the CP is configured as ignore the service route prefix seed. For the segment list flags, we define a new flag, S flag. When set, indicate the segment list is in admin shutdown state, and the segment list cannot be forwarding. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. We are seeking for adoption code, and any questions, comments are welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Zhangguang. There are 3 in the queue, and we're going to cap the question period to 3 minutes. So please be respectful. Zafar, you first.
Yeah, this is Zafar Ali from Cisco. I have 2 comments. One is about your comment about invalidation drop. Is the reason the invalidation drop is a SR policy attribute, not CP. So you need to establish that first. And the second thing is that this work, there's a similar work that is in Spring and on Spring agenda. We did discuss something offline with the authors on that. We like to see a coherent view of what operations on policies that we are talking about. And I think that would be better to get that work done in spring, and then corresponding changes to here or PSAP or other protocol can happen.
Yeah, thank you. We can discuss more in the offline. Yeah.
Thank you.
Himanshu?
Thanks.
Himanshu from Siena. The says I whatever Jafar said for the second comment, we do have an eligibility flag for the SR policy. That work is going on in the spring working group, and we need to have a coordination between that, and has to be a single solution. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Sue? Sue, you have the microphone.
Sorry, slow on that one, Jeff. For the authors, I would like to see all these bits coordinated between spring. That will be part of our adoption checks before the bits in us before we go to adoption. I will work with the spring chairs on that. Second, you will also be receiving Shepherd reports since you've asked for adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah,
Sue.
thank you.
And Changwang, thank you for your presentation. Our next presentation is going to be on FlowSpec, which is the Sue and Jeff show.
Yep, so we should have both mics. We'll try to be functional. I think I have the first set and Jeff has the second. So here we go. There are a set of drafts. I released the Harris drafts, the basic 4. We've added Jeff as a co-author. These are the issues we want to discuss. We have made FlowSpec v2 something where we're looking for input from authors. So Jeff brought up some good points about defaults and our assignment of filter TLVs and components. Can we be intelligent in our second round? And then I'll talk about what happens with a sparse set of components and a minimal FlowSpec v2. Some of this has come from comments from implementers. Then we'll talk about actions, and Jeff will pick up some of our discussion and we will go from there. So let me start in. First of all, the whole purpose for the filters to going to FlowSpec v2 was to be able to have good expansions with the TLV and user order. Now, user order is required by some application, but some applications just want defaults to work. They just want to have it to filter their packet. There are 2 approaches for these defaults. I took the simple approach in the first, which is just number it ascendingly. However, there makes a good point for having something else. So here is your format again. Remember, we have the NRI and we have a TLV for the filter type. This was, for example, one of the filter types is just the IP basic filter type for FlowSpec v1. And the components are fit with underneath that. Okay, the simple ordering took an ascending. Jeff makes the point, and a good one, I believe, that perhaps you want to do it based on how you might do the frames, from the MPLS rules to the L2 rules to the SFC to tunnel to basic to extended. Now, I will go through why you might have multiple filter rules after we've worked through several use cases it seems that a filter rule type might be more common, because you might use a filter rule type for a group of components. For example, the IP basic filter rules are simply the V1s, but you might want to add the tunnel a TTL before the basic filter rules, but nothing else. So that this extra spacing allows the TLV to have assignments done by a designated expert, so that you can create the new groups of filter components. Now, the same thing is true of components, and for that, in the last IETF, and in the one midsummer, I showed you how you can space out the components for these assignments. So again, your components can be assigned either sequentially or as the types. So basic filter rules might be at 256 and extended filters above. You notice if we put the components in that order, the numbering of the components, like the numbering of the filter rules, are sequential. Okay, here's just as an eye chart that you can look at your leisure. Here was the proposal at IETF 120, and here's the packet order proposal. That seems to be where I'd like to take this, because Jeff made a good point. This makes the defaults just work. Now, the components right now would be in the same namespace. If it becomes crowded, the TLV types allows us to reorder those. Okay, sparse component folks, and why we added filter types. Sparse component folks takes us into multiple filter types, because you might want to say, I'm just going to add the the TTL link at the beginning of the FlowSpec v2, and that's going to be a whole new set, because we promised the v1 folks that we would just allow just the v1 for minimal transition. But your next filter type might be the v1 plus TTL. And again, another example for the expanded components, you might want to have just a few of the filter types. The other way, that is the way that we've designed the component numbers as a proposal. There is one other way to do it, and that's to have a specific component that has a bit, much like Jeff proposed for our V1 edition, that identifies the filters. How would that look? You might put a component here that identifies which components for the extended IP filters are actually there. We'd like some feedback on this approach. Both approaches can be done at the same time. We're going to need some input from the working group, as this is a working group draft. This, in many cases, seems to solve some of the problems people have mentioned. Next slide. Some people ask, what's the minimal FlowSpec v2 implementation? The minimal is an AFI-SAFI pair with this new LRI format and extended communities. You can pass all V1 filters in V2. So some of the people who were implementing asked, can this just be one LRI? Yes, but it's got to be the FlowSpec V2 LRI. We've made it specifically easy to move the V1 filters into V2 format. you could just leave the order with a 1 and do a straight transfer. We did define more than that because there were existing definitions in the IDR. There were definitions for IP forwarding as one SAFI and IPVPN as the other. There were 5 different potential AFIs for this. You do not have to support, you just negotiate one. Jeff will go into the categories and the actions of extended communities to try to make it simple before we get to the BGP community container attribute. And at this point, Jeff, I believe we're going to pick up existing actions in extended community, how to look at those actions, and provide easy support. Your turn, Jeff.
Yep, thanks, Sue. I'm going to let you drive the slides to avoid changing things over. So as Sue was mentioning, we have sort of 3 broad headaches dealing with FlowSpec v2. The first one is we needed user ordering to allow for the user to have control over the firewall actions. Most of the complexity, as Sue is hitting, is how do we make the default rule sets for FlowSpec implement filters in a way that matches common use cases, and figuring out what the numbering space for that looks like for the different extensions that we're building was a huge headache and is going to be where a bit of complexity is. The third piece that we're hitting now is actions. And the headache that we've had for the actions is a common set of things. What we have on this screen is the set of actions from 8955. This is what everybody theoretically understands. We have the redirect IP one that I'm working on with Adam and company for quite a while now. We also have a interface set document as well that's going to be part of dealing with this use case. And we also have an SFC use case as well. Next slide, please. So the headache that we have for each of these things is, number one, how are they encoded right now? Today they go in extended communities. They're sort of sprinkled around the extended community space. There's extended communities theoretically, in many cases, are lined up based on structure of the community, what it contains. A lot of the stuff for FlowSpec originally has been concentrated what you see the old experimental space. The problem is they're not really everywhere. And as an example, we have some things that are match criteria rather than action criteria. The interface set was put there so that it could actually be allowed to be mutable when you cross from one network domain to the other. It has to be able to be changed. You can't do that with NLRI. So it's not quite an action, but we have to think about it in sort of the same way. Next slide, please. So the second headache that we have when we're dealing with the broad set of things is, how do these things interact with each other? And 8955 did actually spend some energy discussing conflicts. And thanks Christoph, that we actually got this stuff written down, at least for the first pass. But we didn't have a sense about how to reconcile, when we do have conflicts, what to do about them. Part of the work that we're driving here is, if we can put things, broadly into categories, what we're going to see, next slide, is that these things are not as scary conflict-wise as you might think. We have things like, some limits on the filters. And this turns the interface set conversation into the one question of, is this really a match criteria or a strange action criteria? The answer to that actually is going to impact the order of the firewall. So this is going to be an interesting conversation across vendors. But for the rest of the stuff that are strictly actions, we have things that are broadly rate limits of some sort, touch things like DSCP in the packet, trigger actions like sampling. We have a broad set of redirect actions, and especially when we have the redirect actions, we have significant opportunity for conflicts, especially when we have like redirect IP, which for its original encoding allowed for overloading the presence of both indirect redirect IP and redirect to VRF as redirect to the IP within the VRF. The semantic wasn't quite clear, especially when you have implementations that don't support both. So this is leading us to look at untangling some of these conflicting cases and flattening out the use cases so that the conflicts are clear. And the final one is, like logic things. Do we actually, continue or terminate our action? Next slide. So the other problem we have is, what is the support of a given platform for a feature? As an example, implementation may understand a thing, it might not understand a thing, and even if it does understand it, it may not want to use it. And that might be something via configuration. We will see this sort of thing, especially for customer-injected flow spec, where you just simply say, from a policy level, you don't want to support some feature because it doesn't fit into your network provisioning. Next slide. So the other thing that we have that was a problem when we were looking at, how do we reconcile these things when you have this pile of actions, inside of your flow spec route? One of the ideas that we, have tried to codify here is that we might want to have some of these things optional. If we actually, have the actions in some flavor marked in a way that they're either optional and they're nice to have. If you can't do it, that's fine. DSCP is an easy example for both of these cases. Sometimes you just want to set DSCP to have better forwarding in your network. And sometimes you are doing class-based forwarding, which relies on the DSCP, and it's a mandatory thing. The operator is going to be the one that knows these things, but we need to have a way to encode it into the action itself. Next slide. So the trick becomes, what do you do about the encodings? Right now, we have this giant pile of extended communities that haven't flattened the actions right now. But for backwards compatibility, as we move into the first round of FlowSpec v2, we have to support what's there. The question is, how do we get ourselves out of the hole that we've dug ourselves into and try to do better about this in the future? This will require re-implementing the behaviors in a new encoding format. But the nice thing is, this is not as scary as we thought it was going to look when we started this work 2 years ago. And what we effectively have here is a vector of what are the actions that we're going to be able to implement? Is it optional or required? Do they conflict or not? And more importantly, what happens when we have failures? To solve the problem of we were thinking maybe we're going to have this complex bit of Boolean logic with conditional logic built into the thing. This scared every one of the FlowSpec developers for good reason. Conveniently, we think that we have a simpler answer where we can encode these things as action tuples. An action tuple is a list of the actions that have no conflicts, where you must be able to do things to actually install the FlowSpec route. Next slide. And the point about action tuple is that, waiting for the slide change. Thank you, Sue. For single actions per filter, this is obviously not a problem. You can say that, by example, all the extended communities inside of a FlowSpec v1 route, if you say that the behaviors, all of them must be implemented or it's a fail, this isn't easy to encode and understand things with existing extended communities. The trouble is, what happens if things succeed or fail? The question is, do you want to have backup behaviors? If you're able to tag individual actions as being mandatory and required or as optional, as long as you can do all the mandatory required things, options can actually be skipped. And if you can't do that, maybe you want to have an ability to encode more than one. To figure out how we actually do these things, we actually go through the analysis. Is it cross-category? If we have things within a single category that have a conflict, and when we have the conflicts, we can't do the installation. This is something that an implementation is going to have to know, and obviously an operator is going to try not to configure these things, but the protocol has to have sane fallbacks. Next slide. This might be the last slide. We gave simple examples about where things could actually happen, optionality or not. So like setting DSCP, maybe turn on traffic sampling, maybe do a redirect. None of these things are necessarily required for some customer use cases. Maybe we have something like redirect to VERF and we have terminate. Again, no interactions. We don't care. Things can succeed or fail appropriately. But if we have two redirects of conflicting types within the same thing, it can't work. Simply don't do that. Next slide. And we're giving counter examples of these things, especially for like redirect to VRF combined with setting DSCP. If you're doing class-based forwarding, this is a problem for the operator. You have to know that it has to be encoded. For the rest of this, we'll just skip to the next slide. Now, in terms of actual encoding, this is going to go into some new path attribute of some sort. It's going to consist of a list of prioritized entries. Do this thing first, do this thing next if you can't do that. The tuples will be tagged with the types having optionality. They'll have their actions, and they'll have parameters. So like set DSCP says what to set in there. Try them in order, do the first thing that works. If nothing can work, take the default action. What default action means is going to be a point of discussion for the working group. Next slide. And this is a possible set of TLVs that we may end up having in there. Again, we have some things like interface set that's a little bit of a hybrid. We'll discuss that. Sue, further commentary?
No further commentary. Our next steps are there. We're short on time. We'll get feedback. We'll spin drafts. We think it's important to do that before we get to things. So community container will be the last. We will have the action communities and the analysis Jeff mentioned on determining what you can do can work for the extended communities. And I think Kair's been flagging me we're out of time, so we should go to the next presentation.
Yes, and actually, as Kair is flagging here, we're actually going to step over the computer aware thing, move that to the last one. Gian, unfortunately, we're going to slip you to Friday, I think. We want to spend the remainder of our time talking about FCBGP.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm working on sharing slides.
Thank you. Hi, Jeff. So thank you for your comments. So what do you want me to basically go straight to the question and answering, or I can go present this stuff first?
My recommendation is you have a short presentation on the protocol contents. If you could go through that at speed, we can save the rest of the time for discussion. My slides are simply a prompt for discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I will go quick on this presentation. So it's we have been discussing this forwarding commitment BGP for multiple IETFs. Sorry, I cannot attend in person this time. So there has been a lot of versions since 118. We are present this idea in both IDR and CIDR ops teams. And in today's presentation, we want to have a profile for the forwarding commitment path attribute. The primary goal of this presentation is we want to find a reasonable home for this work, where this kind of draft can be landed somewhere in the IETF working group. So I will skip the key problem statement. There is we want to have a new mechanisms of secure the BGP announcement, and we want the two primary goals of this proposal is we want to have a full deployment. In case of full deployment, which we know is very hard to achieve, but in case of full deployment, we want to have want to prove that all authenticated BGP path is a real path. And also in a partial deployment case, which we believe is will be a very critical in practice, because it's difficult to deploy everything on the internet for every routers. That's why we want to have a protocol that is natively compatible with the BGP, and we also hope it can provide strong security guarantees in case of partial deployment. So the key mechanism of this proposal is what we want to have is something called forwarding commitment or verifiable routing commitment, which allows an AS to publicly announce, okay, I receive a prefix from this neighbor, and I want to extend this route to my next neighbor. So this is called what we call the per pathlet validation scheme. So basically, the ASB will sign this whole thing saying, okay, I like to accept a route from my neighbor A, and I want to extend this route to my neighbor C for this prefix. So it publicly announces its routing intent, basically. And what we do is we will define a new path attribute to carry this kind of forwarding commitment while the BGP path is building up in the internet. And what we do is upon you receive a update with FCBGP attribute, the router needs to verify this path attribute to make sure it is coherent, it is signed properly. And also, given this FCBGP attribute, we want to have two rules to select the best routes. All these materials has been covered previously, so I will go through this very quickly. And we do a bunch of security analysis in full deployment and in partial deployment. And what we prove is that in full deployment, it can make sure that any path that can be validated by strategically combining FCs is actually a legitimate path. And we have some paper that is available on our archive for people to review. So in last IETF meeting, actually, Jeff sent us in a very long email, which we discussed over the email to seeing what is the problem of copy and paste of FCs, because as FCBGP does not like the BGP-SEC, it recursively signs the entire path. It's only signs it's a upstream AS and a downstream AS, so it's a 3-hop pathlet. And we do a lot of analysis here, and we also sent out this email. And the final stuff is the result of this discussion is actually there is a potential subtle difference between the security guarantee of FCBGP and the BGP-SEC. So what we can prove is that even if you were able to sort of like copy and paste this stuff to combine a path, but the bottom line is this path is still essentially valid because every pathlet on this path has been announced and signed properly. So although there might be the case that this path does not fully established through the BGP propagation, but every pathlet on this path has to be authorized in order for an attacker to copy and paste. So we believe this subtle difference is the difference between this security guarantee with BGP-SEC is very subtle, but still it provides a meaningful security guarantee for FCBGP. And also we do some other security analysis, and we do some quantifiable results. Basically, we're seeing, okay, at a very low deployment ratio, what is the security guarantee between FCBGP and the BGP-SEC? And what we can see is that because of our partial deployment design, naturally, FCBGP can provide more security guarantee in case of very low deployment rate. That's basically this entire FCBGP protocol, and it is a primitive named verifiable routing commitment to enhance the security of a routing control plane. And it's fully compatible with BGP and also incrementally deployable. And also it makes reasonable security guarantees in case of partial deployment as well.
Okay, and if you don't mind, I'll load my slides as the start for the conversation.
Yes, please.
And I wish to recognize the authors for having a very clear and very easy to read spec, especially for security related things. This is very important. So thank you for the clarity in the document. So keeping this very brief, The things I found very helpful about this is that the state that we cover by the forwarding commitment is absolutely helpful for validating portions of the AS path graph in an incrementally deployable fashion, as a policy type thing. This is especially helpful since ASPA, which has gotten a lot of attention within CIDR ops and the operator community as well, does not actually validate the path graph. It is there to provide proof of valley-free routing. It does a slightly different thing. So it's still a good mechanism. And it's worth comparing this to prior work on SOBGP, which actually provides the path graph itself, although SOBGP is non-directional, whereas the FC attribute is. As we noted, the FC state can be deleted without detection in the current procedures. It's partially why BGPsec does its work to sign across the forwarding of the chain. One of the things that's worth pointing out, and this is actually a useful thing for those that are watching BGP security space, there is a proposal called BGP ISEC at the link below that, as best I can tell, the paper came out a little bit after the original FC BGP presentations. So I'm not going to claim who came first. Their paper is written in a very academic fashion rather than FC BGP IETF styles that we see out of the drafts. A property they have there is known adoption in public keys, where by having information in the RPKI that this procedure is being used, you can use that a little bit similar to how the DANE procedures work for email, leveraging DNS presence to say that there should be stuff happening inside of your email. Their procedures say that if this is an RPKI, you should expect a signature, and you can treat it as a signal that it has been deleted. The nice thing is, this idea can be leveraged against FCBGP as well, and I'd suggest the authors look at it. One of the things that's incredibly important to point out for the upcoming CIDR ops session is that the authors are working on the FC profile and also the FC verification for RPKI objects. And what I find sort of interesting is, as policy, much like ASPA, doing the FC BGP against the RPKI has a lot of useful benefits. The question really I have for the working group, and the main discussion point that I think IDR cares about for the short period and will overlap the conversation with CIDR ops, is does carrying the cryptography inside of the BGP update give us benefit? And my short observations to start the conversation is that for any specific tuple, since this is decoupled and severable, it means that it's sort of a one-time surprise. This route actually has been touched by this router, and that's the only property you can get out of it. And this is what leads to my copy and paste type replay attacks. It's worth pointing out that technically BGPsec does have a flavor of this, but since you're signing across the entirety of the path, that sort of replay behavior can only be done for stuff that is an entire leading chain of segments. So it's a little more resilient against shortening attacks. The things that I find at least at first glance useful, again, the AS graph is valuable. Again, this resembles SOBGP. I think that we should absolutely pursue that, but that means that that work may be a combination of CIDR ops and GROW potentially. There might be some value, as the paper tries to provide proof of, where when we have sufficient coverage of the feature and it's deployed well enough, it's largely almost as good as BGPsec, if not exactly as good. So the question is partially, what's the number? The graph that was shown is partially there. And if we're doing partial signatures, one of the follow-up questions, and I apologize to the FCBGP authors, we have this competing IDF and ISEC, which lets us sign the path attributes as well. Do we potentially get some benefit by expanding the scope if we're going to do partial at all? So that's the points I wish to kick off. Please take the first chance to respond.
Thank you for the comments there. So I basically see the two concerns over there. The first concern, as we discussed, is the how can you verify whether the state has been the FC state has been removed over there? I think it's a legit consideration. But meanwhile, it's as you mentioned, the BGP-SEC has I think every sort of like control plane protocols has this type of issues. How you gonna prevent basically the state removal from the control plane information, right? So we are we probably will we will consider, as you mentioned, the way we can have something more static information in the RPKI, sort of to, you know, as a side evidence to basically have some signal saying, okay, this FC might have been removed. Right, so we will try to consider that, but yeah, that's a very good problem. But also we want to make sure we will not trying to add too much stuff into the RPK, because, you know, there has to be the RPK stuff itself is not real time, right? So we will have some trying to have some statical, more static information to stored in RPK to help this to remove the to basically detect the state removal stuff. For the second concern, is also a great concern, as we discussed. There is a possibility of copy and paste, and but as I explained in the presentation earlier, and also we have email exchange earlier, we believe that the copy and paste is not a, you know, sort of like red button for this kind of security guarantee, and the guarantee offered by FCBGP is meaningful, as I just stated earlier. Even if you do the copy pass, but if the pass is authorized, then every passlet on the pass is actually, you know, authorized by all these ASs. So this pass actually is a legit in this kind of security definitions there. So that said, although we could argue that FCBGP and BGP-SEC have different security goals, security guarantees in case of partial deployment, but what we want to see is the security guarantees of FCBGP still make sense. Has a lot of security meaning over there.
I completely agree. So we've reached top of our, I would like to leave one parting comment before we adjourn. And again, we'll be meeting on Friday. So we will continue this on the list. I think there's value for this discussion. And your last point is exactly the one I wanted the working group to spend their thinking time about. We've sort of demonstrated that FCBGP doesn't do exactly the same thing that BGP-SEC does. It does, for sufficient deployment, have a lot of good properties. The question for the IETF is that we spent, several years sort of working through what we thought we wanted out of secure interdomain routing. And we do actually have regulators that have started asking us, when are you going to deploy this? Because it's important. If we're going to decide that something that isn't a full chain of signatures is what we want, we have to decide, if the different set of properties it gives us is enough to make, the operators, the implementers, and, the internet as a whole happy. So thank you for starting the conversation. I highly recommend, if you're interested in the topic, please attend the upcoming CyberOps meeting, where they'll be covering the policy elements of these, and we'll continue the protocol discussions on the mailing list. So thank you for the presentation and listening to the initial comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, everyone. We will see you on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.